The rain had been falling for 3 days straight. Not the gentle kind that makes you want to curl up with a book, but the heavy, relentless type that makes the whole world feel gray and tired. Daniel sat at his desk by the window, staring at his computer screen. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of rain hitting the glass and the occasional click of his mouse. He was a photographer. Had been for about 15 years now. His place was a mess of equipment, old cameras, tripods leaning against walls, and thousands of photos scattered everywhere. Some printed, some still trapped in hard drives, waiting to be seen. It was a small loft apartment in Portland, the kind with exposed brick walls and creaky wooden floors that landlords call character. Daniel lived alone. It wasn't always like this. There had been relationships, roommates, a life that felt fuller once. But somewhere along the way, he'd gotten comfortable with the silence. Comfortable with his routines. Wake up, make coffee, edit photos, take assignments, pay bills, sleep. Repeat. It wasn't a bad life, just a quiet one. That Thursday evening was like any other. He'd spent the whole day editing photos for a client, some corporate website that needed stock images of happy people doing business things. The kind of work that paid well but made him feel empty inside. He used to love photography, used to feel something when he pressed the shutter button. Now it was just work. He was adjusting the brightness on a photo of a woman in a suit shaking hands when he heard footsteps in the hallway. That was weird. Only 2 apartments were on the 3rd floor, his and Mrs. Chen's next door. She was an elderly woman who mostly kept to herself. She rarely had visitors, and when she did, they were usually family members he recognized. These footsteps were different, slow, hesitant. They stopped right outside his door. Daniel waited. Maybe someone had the wrong apartment. It happened sometimes. The building was old, and the numbering system confused delivery people all the time. He went back to his editing, expecting the footsteps to move on. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. Not the confident knock of a delivery person or the familiar rhythm of a friend. This was uncertain. Careful. Daniel pushed back from his desk and walked to the door. He wasn't expecting anyone. Hadn't ordered anything online. For a moment he considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of him. When he opened the door, he found himself staring at a woman he'd never seen before. She was completely soaked from the rain. Her dark hair stuck to her face and neck. Water dripped from her jacket onto the hallway floor. She was holding an old leather suitcase that looked like it had traveled through several lifetimes. But it was her eyes that caught him off guard. They were looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite understand. It wasn't fear or confusion. It was something else. Recognition, maybe. Like she knew him. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was soft, almost drowned out by the rain still pounding outside. "I know this is going to sound really strange." Daniel stood there, holding the door half open, not sure what to say. His mind was already running through possibilities. Was she lost? In trouble? Did she need help? "You're Daniel Rivera, right?" she asked. That caught him completely off guard. How did she know his name? He didn't recognize her at all. His photographer brain automatically cataloged details. Late 20s, maybe early 30s, tired eyes, clothes that suggested she'd been traveling for a while. The suitcase looked heavy. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Do I know you?" She shook her head, water droplets flying. "No, we've never met. My name is Sophia." She paused like she was gathering courage for what came next. "5 years ago, you took a photograph. You probably don't remember it. But that photograph changed everything for me. I've been looking for you ever since." Daniel's mind went blank. 5 years ago? He'd taken thousands of photographs 5 years ago. Tens of thousands, probably. He photographed everything back then. Street scenes, portraits, landscapes, random moments that caught his eye. How could one of them have meant something to a complete stranger standing in his hallway, soaked and holding a suitcase? "I don't understand," he said. Sophia shifted the weight of her suitcase. "Can I come in? I promise I'm not crazy." "Well, maybe a little bit for showing up like this, but I've come a long way and I really need to explain something to you." Daniel knew he should probably be more cautious. This was exactly the kind of situation his mother had warned him about growing up. Don't talk to strangers. Don't let people you don't know into your home. But something about Sophia's expression made him trust her. She didn't look dangerous. She looked desperate. Not in a scary way, but in a way that suggested she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time, and finally found the place to put it down. "Okay," he heard himself say. He stepped back and opened the door wider. Sophia walked in, leaving wet footprints on his wooden floor. She set her suitcase down by the door and looked around the apartment. Her eyes moved over the cameras, the photos on the walls, the chaos of his creative life spread across every surface. "You're still shooting," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Daniel replied. "It's what I do. Here, let me get you a towel, and I'll make some tea or coffee. You look like you need to warm up." He disappeared into his small bathroom and grabbed a clean towel, then moved to the kitchen to put the kettle on. His mind was racing. Who was this woman? What photograph was she talking about? And why had she been looking for him for 5 years? When he came back, Sophia was standing by his desk looking at the photos he'd been editing. The corporate shots of people pretending to be happy at work. "Is this what you do now?" she asked. There was no judgment in her voice, but Daniel felt defensive anyway. "It pays the bills." Sophia turned to look at him, accepting the towel he offered. She dried her hair and face and suddenly looked more human, less like a ghost who'd walked out of the rain. "The photograph you took of me," she said. "It didn't pay any bills, but it saved my life." Daniel handed Sophia a mug of hot tea and sat down across from her. His mind was still trying to make sense of what she'd just said. Saved her life? That seemed like a pretty big claim for a photograph. He'd taken pictures of sunsets, buildings, people on streets. How could any of those save someone's life? Sophia wrapped her hands around the warm mug and took a sip. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts, deciding where to start. The rain continued its steady drumming against the windows, creating a cocoon of sound around them. 5 years ago, she began, you were in Barcelona. Do you remember that trip? Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, I was there for a travel magazine. They wanted photos of the city for some article about hidden gems in Europe. I spent about a week there. You were in the Gothic quarter on your last day, Sophia continued. It was a Sunday afternoon. There was this little cafe tucked away on a side street. You walked past it and took some photos. The memory started coming back to Daniel. He remembered that day. It had been beautiful weather, the kind of golden afternoon light that photographers dream about. He'd been wandering through those narrow medieval streets, shooting everything that caught his eye. Street musicians, old buildings, tourists, locals going about their lives. I think I remember, he said. There was good light that day. Sophia smiled slightly. There was, and I was sitting at one of the outdoor tables at that cafe. I had a notebook in front of me, a pen in my hand. I was completely lost in what I was writing. I didn't even notice you take the photo. Daniel tried to picture it. He'd taken so many candid shots that day. People watching, he called it. Capturing authentic moments when people didn't know they were being observed. It was the kind of photography he used to love before it became just another job. I was writing a letter that day, Sophia said, her voice getting quieter. A very important letter. I was quitting my graduate program, walking away from 6 years of university work. I was also ending a relationship that had been slowly destroying me from the inside. She paused, looking down at her tea. I'd been trying to write that letter for months. Every time I started, I'd panic and delete it. But that day, sitting in that cafe, something clicked. I finally found the courage to write the words I needed to say. I was terrified, but I was doing it. Daniel listened, trying to understand where this was going. He photographed a woman writing in a cafe. So what? People did that all the time in Barcelona. It was a city full of writers and dreamers and people finding themselves. About 3 months later, Sophia continued, I was in Madrid visiting a friend. She dragged me to this small art gallery. She knew I'd been having a rough time and thought looking at some art might cheer me up. And there, on one of the walls, was your photograph. Of me. She looked up at Daniel and he could see the emotion in her eyes. I didn't even recognize myself at first. The woman in that photo looked so peaceful, so focused, so completely present in what she was doing. I looked at it for probably 10 minutes before I realized it was me from that day in Barcelona. The gallery had gotten it from some group exhibition you'd been part of, she explained. Your name was on a small card next to it. Daniel Rivera. That was the first time I learned who you were. Daniel felt something stirring in his chest. A feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. That sense that photography could actually mean something. that capturing a moment could matter. I bought a small print of it, Sophia said. Spent money I probably shouldn't have spent, but I needed to have it. Because when I looked at that photograph, I saw the person I wanted to be. Not the anxious student trying to please everyone. Not the girlfriend trying to fix a broken relationship. Just someone peaceful and purposeful, doing what felt right. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through it, then turned the screen toward Daniel. There was the photo. A young woman at a cafe table, afternoon light streaming through the leaves above her, her face tilted down toward her notebook, completely absorbed in her own world. It was a good shot. Daniel could see why it had been included in the exhibition. That photograph gave me courage, Sophia said. Every time I doubted my decision to leave school, every time I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake, I looked at that picture, and I reminded myself that I'd been brave once. I could be brave again. Daniel didn't know what to say. He'd spent the last few years taking photos for money, treating his camera like a tool for paying rent. He'd forgotten that images could touch people, could change them. But that's not the whole story, Sophia continued. About a year after I left school, I wasn't feeling well, just tired all the time, having headaches. My friend convinced me to see a doctor. I only went because she wouldn't stop bugging me about it. She took another sip of tea, and Daniel noticed her hands were shaking slightly. They found something, a medical condition. Nothing immediately dangerous, but something that needed treatment. The doctor told me if I'd waited another year, it could have become serious. Really serious. Daniel felt his breath catch. And if you'd stayed in school? I would have ignored the symptoms, Sophia finished. I would have been too stressed, too busy, too focused on trying to meet everyone's expectations. I would have pushed through until it was too late. But because I'd left, because I'd made that choice to listen to myself, I was in a better place mentally. I actually paid attention to my body. I got help. She looked directly at him. Your photograph didn't just inspire me to change my life. It started a chain of events that literally saved my life. And I've been trying to find you ever since to tell you that, to say thank you. Daniel sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. He'd taken thousands of photos, hundreds of thousands. And this one random shot in Barcelona, taken without thinking, without planning, had done all of this. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Sophia smiled. You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. I needed you to understand that what you do matters. That your work has value beyond just paying bills. Outside, the rain was finally starting to slow down. And inside that small apartment, something was beginning to shift. Daniel looked at his camera on the desk, and for the first time in years, he felt that old familiar pull, that desire to capture something real. The next morning, Daniel woke up thinking about Sophia's story. She'd left after they talked for another hour, finding a small hotel nearby, but her words kept echoing in his mind. Your work has value beyond just paying bills. When was the last time he'd created something that actually mattered to him? He made coffee and sat by the window, watching the city wake up. The rain had finally stopped, leaving everything clean and fresh. His camera sat on the desk where it always did, but today it looked different somehow. Like it was waiting for him to remember what it was really for. Sophia had given him her number before she left. Around noon, he found himself calling her. Hey, it's Daniel, he said when she answered. I was thinking, maybe we could meet up today? I'd love to hear more about what happened after you saw that photograph. They met at a small coffee shop downtown. Sophia looked different in the daylight, less like a mysterious visitor and more like a regular person. She ordered a cappuccino and they found a quiet corner table. So you left school, Daniel prompted. What did you do after that? Sophia's face lit up. I moved to this tiny town on the coast in northern Spain, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. I got a job at a bookshop. It barely paid anything, but I didn't need much. I had a small apartment above the shop and I spent my evenings writing. Writing what? Daniel asked. Stories. Fiction. All the things I'd wanted to write but never had time for when I was trying to get my degree. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't working towards some goal that someone else had set for me. I was just living. Daniel understood that feeling. Or at least he remembered understanding it once. Before photography became about deadlines and invoices and making clients happy. Did you publish anything? He asked. A few short stories in small magazines. Nothing big. But that wasn't really the point. The point was that I was doing something that felt true to me. She looked at him curiously. What about you? When did photography stop being fun? The question caught Daniel off guard. He opened his mouth to deny it, to say that he still loved what he did. But sitting across from someone who'd just shared her whole story with him, he couldn't lie. I don't know exactly when it happened, he admitted. It was gradual. First you take one corporate job because you need to pay rent, then another. Then suddenly that's all you're doing. The personal projects get pushed aside. You tell yourself you'll get back to them later, but later never comes. Sophia nodded like she understood completely. What kind of photography did you use to love? People, Daniel said immediately. Real moments. Like that shot of you in Barcelona. I used to walk around cities just watching people live their lives. I'd capture these tiny moments that told whole stories. A couple holding hands, an old man feeding pigeons, kids playing in a fountain. I loved finding the beauty in ordinary life. Why did you stop? Because it doesn't pay, Daniel said with a bitter laugh. You can't make a living taking random photos of strangers living their lives. You need clients. You need commercial work. You need to grow up and be practical. Sophia was quiet for a moment, then she pulled out her phone again. Can I show you something? She opened a website and turned the screen toward him. It was a blog called Small Moments, Big Changes. The design was simple but beautiful, and it was full of photographs. Her photographs, Daniel scrolled through them amazed. They weren't technically perfect. The lighting wasn't always ideal. The composition sometimes broke the rules. But every single image had something. That same quality his Barcelona photo had possessed. Authenticity, truth. I started taking photos after I saw yours, Sophia explained. I wanted to learn how to see the world the way you did. How to find those quiet, beautiful moments. I started this blog to document my journey. To share what I was learning, Daniel kept scrolling. Each photo had a story with it. Short essays about the moments she'd captured and what they meant to her. There were hundreds of posts. Thousands of followers commenting, sharing their own stories. This is incredible, he said honestly. You inspired this, Sophia said. Your way of seeing taught me how to look at the world differently. And now I'm trying to pass that on to other people. An idea started forming in Daniel's mind. It was crazy, probably. But then again, Sophia had tracked him down after 5 years because of a single photograph. Maybe crazy was exactly what he needed. What if we worked together on something? He said suddenly. Sophia looked surprised. What do you mean? A project. About moments that change people's lives. We could interview people about their turning points and create visual stories around them. You're good at getting people to open up, and I know how to capture moments. We could combine our skills. He could see Sophia processing the idea, her eyes getting brighter. Like what happened with your photograph and me. Exactly. How many other people out there have stories like yours? Moments that seemed ordinary but changed everything? What if we could capture those stories? Show people that their lives matter? That their moments matter? Sophia leaned back in her chair, a smile spreading across her face. That's actually brilliant. I love it. Over the next few days they planned. Sophia extended her stay in Portland, finding a cheap room at a hostel. They spent hours at Daniel's apartment, mapping out their project. What questions would they ask? How would they find people to interview? What would the final product look like? Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Excitement. Purpose. That electric feeling of working on something that mattered, not just something that paid bills. They started small. Daniel reached out to his neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She'd lived in Portland for 40 years and he'd never really talked to her beyond polite hellos in the hallway. When they asked if she'd share her story, her face lit up. Mrs. Chen told them about coming to America with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. About the day she'd walked past a small restaurant with a help wanted sign and decided to go in, even though her English was terrible. That single decision had led to meeting her husband, building a life, raising a family. Daniel photographed her in her apartment, surrounded by photos of her children and grandchildren. He captured her hands worn from decades of hard work, her eyes, still bright with the memory of that brave young woman who'd walked into a strange restaurant so many years ago. When they showed her the final images paired with her story, Mrs. Chen cried. "I never thought my life was interesting," she said. "But seeing it like this through your eyes, I realize it was extraordinary." That's when Daniel knew they were onto something real, something important. And for the first time in years, he picked up his camera not because someone was paying him, but because he genuinely wanted to capture the moment. Word started spreading about what Daniel and Sophia were doing. Mrs. Chen told her friends at the community center. One of them told another. Soon, people were reaching out wanting to share their stories. There was Vincent, a 70-year-old jazz musician who'd been working at a factory his whole life. He told them about a Tuesday afternoon when he was 25, walking past a music store. He'd heard a saxophone playing through the open door. Just a few notes, a simple melody. But something about those notes hit him so hard that he walked inside, spent his entire paycheck on a used saxophone, and taught himself to play. 50 years later, music was still his greatest joy, even though he'd never become famous. Daniel photographed Vincent with his saxophone in the small room where he practiced every evening after work. The golden hour light streaming through the window, the worn brass of the instrument, the absolute peace on Vincent's face when he played. These were the kinds of images Daniel had forgotten he could create. Then there was Lisa, a young barista at the coffee shop where Daniel and Sophia often met. She'd overheard them talking about the project and shyly asked if her story counted. She told them about serving coffee to a customer who'd left a newspaper on the table. Lisa had picked it up to throw it away, but a headline caught her eye. An article about wrongful convictions and lawyers working to free innocent people. She'd read the whole thing during her break and something clicked. 6 months later, she'd applied to law school. She was now studying at night while working during the day, determined to become a defense attorney. Daniel captured her behind the counter, coffee machine steam rising around her, law book stacked next to the register. The determination in her eyes, the hope. Every person they interviewed revealed something beautiful, something Daniel had been missing by only taking corporate photos of people pretending to be happy. These were real emotions, real transformations, real life. As the weeks passed, Daniel noticed something else happening. He and Sophia were becoming closer, not in a dramatic, romantic movie kind of way, but there was an understanding between them that felt deep and rare. They could communicate with just a look. They knew what the other was thinking before words were spoken. Late nights in his apartment reviewing photos and editing stories felt easy, natural, like they'd been doing this together for years instead of weeks. Sophia would make tea at 2 in the morning without asking if he wanted any. She just knew. And Daniel would adjust the lighting in a photo before Sophia even mentioned it needed something. He could sense what she was seeing, but neither of them talked about it. Maybe because Sophia was still healing from everything she'd been through. Maybe because Daniel had built walls around himself after years of living alone. Or maybe they both knew that what they were building together was too important to complicate. One evening, they were working on editing photos when Sophia suddenly went quiet. Daniel looked up from his computer and saw her staring at the screen with an expression he couldn't read. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing's wrong," she said slowly. "I was just thinking about how strange this all is. One photograph 5 years ago created this whole chain of events. You took my picture. That changed my life, which brought me here, which created this project, which is now changing other people's lives." Daniel had been thinking about the same thing. It makes me wonder about all the other photos I've taken over the years. All the people I've captured without knowing their names or their stories. How many other invisible connections are out there that we'll never know about? Sophia turned to face him fully. "That's exactly why this project matters so much. We can't know about all of them, but we can tell some of these stories. We can show people that ordinary moments can be extraordinary." "You know what scares me?" Daniel admitted. "What if I hadn't opened the door that night? What if I'd ignored the knock and you'd just gone away?" "But you did open it," Sophia said simply. "That's the thing about moments. We can't know which ones will matter until later. All we can do is stay open to possibility." They continued working, but Daniel's mind kept returning to her words. Stay open to possibility. He'd stopped doing that somewhere along the way. He'd closed himself off, choosing safety and routine over risk and meaning. 3 months into the project, they had over 20 stories, 20 people, 20 moments that had changed everything. The collection was powerful, moving. Daniel knew it was the best work he'd done in his entire career. A friend who ran a small gallery downtown offered to host an exhibition. They spent weeks preparing, printing photos, formatting stories to display alongside the images. Daniel hadn't felt this kind of creative energy since his early days as a photographer, when everything felt possible and nothing felt like just a job. The night before the exhibition opening, Daniel and Sophia sat in his apartment, exhausted but satisfied. Everything was ready. The photos were hung. The stories were printed. All they had to do was show up tomorrow and let people experience what they'd created. "I need to tell you something," Sophia said suddenly. There was something in her voice that made Daniel's stomach tighten. "Okay, I'm going back to Spain in 2 days." The words hit him harder than he expected. He'd known this couldn't last forever. Sophia had a life back home. This was always temporary. But hearing her say it made it real. "I see," he managed to say. "I have to," Sophia continued. "There are things I need to take care of there. People I need to see. And honestly, this project, this whole thing we've created, it needs to be yours, not ours. If I stay, people will think we did this together. But you're the one who had the vision all along. I just reminded you of it." Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that none of this would exist without her. But looking at her face, he could see she'd already made up her mind. "Will you at least come to the opening tomorrow?" he asked. Sophia shook her head slowly. "I don't think I should."